Hi, I'm Laura.
And I'm Mallory.
And this week we are joining you from the Ropes course on the campus of Meridian to conclude our 3-part mini-series on thinking traps.
Yep, so we're going to talk, I think Laura's going to talk about the last 2 today. So just as a little summary, the past 2 weeks we've covered different thinking traps. So what this mini-series is really covering is this concept of having these negative thoughts that we have, or thinking traps as we call them, and then how do we recognize those thoughts and how do we actively reframe those thoughts, because as we know, thoughts are connected to behaviors, which are connected to feelings. It's all connected, right? So if we can reframe our thoughts, then maybe we can have a more positive outlook.
Just better consequences
or
altogether.
Just better consequences in general, So the first week we talked about jumping to conclusions and I always forget it. Mind reading,
yes.
right? Jumping to conclusions, mind reading. Last week we talked about all me and all them. So this week is our last 2 thinking traps. Laura, do you want to talk a little bit about what those are?
I do. So this week we're going to wrap it up with the toxic duo, right? So these are the toxic, the most toxic of the 2, and a lot of times we see them come together, and they are everything and always. Okay, so when we are looking at having a negative feeling or a negative consequence in our life, behavior, reaction, emotion, and we look at the thought that we might want to change, there may be some clues that we are experiencing a thinking trap of an always or an everything. And what that looks like, what an everything looks like, is believing that if this one thing is bad, that means that everything else is bad as well. So can you think of what that might look like an example of what that could look like?
So if you mess up a project at work, right? It's the day that this happens. You mess up a project at work, think, oh man, I can't do anything right. And then maybe I accidentally left my lunchbox or something. And then maybe I did something else in the day. Maybe I
forgot to call your mom back.
Forgot to call my mom back. So maybe in my mind I think I can't do anything right. Everything I do is bad.
Yeah.
Would that be?
That is a perfect example. It's when we just really are at the height of beating ourselves up.
I see. Yeah,
so if I can't do this right, I also can't do this totally unrelated thing right.
And I can't do anything
right? So that's when it's everything. So because of this one bad thing, it means that everything is bad. So when we catch ourselves having those thoughts and we see some clues that might indicate that we are in an everything thinking trap, the critical idea to introduce is to force ourselves to get very specific. What specific area of my life is this negative thing impacting? And what is just the extra stuff that's not really impacted, that's not really a part of this, that I've just sort of thrown in there as part of beating myself up. Right.
Because negative things stick out. So even if it's not really impacting you, it builds up and you think that everything is bad.
Yeah, because all the bad stuff and the things that we already feel, they're kind of on the surface anyway. So in an everything thinking trap, we just kind of cast this net and we just grab everything that's out there. When that's not really what's happening in that moment or in that situation, it's not related. So we have to force ourselves to get very, very specific about the situation that we are dealing with that is causing the emotion. And then force ourselves to sort of stay in that and say, no, it's not about that I didn't call my mom back. I'm not a bad daughter. It's not about that I left my lunchbox. Everybody forgets stuff, right? That didn't impact my life. It's just another annoyance on my day that's bad because I messed up this assignment at work. And that is the thing I have to focus on, the impact of that and the situation of that. So it kind of gets
brings
us
hope, right?
Yes, it absolutely, it's a great word. It introduces some hope into the situation. So that is what everything looks like. So the always thinking trap is similar, but there's a key difference. So the always still focuses on the one thing. So using your same example, if it's an assignment at work, it's our thoughts believe that if I'm bad at work today, I will always be bad at this. This is no hope for any of this to get better. If this thing is bad now, it is always going to be bad. So can you think of another example aside from the work example about maybe in our personal lives, how this might be something?
So if you have a relationship struggle, you may think it's always going to be like this when we know that it's there's up and downs to life, right?
Sure.
Or maybe if you have financial struggles, having that thought that I'm always going to struggle financially, or I'm always going to feel
Like it's
this
never going to
way.
get better.
It's
Yeah.
never going to get better. Yeah.
I even think like currently, like in the pandemic, you know, we're isolated or there's things we can't do. And as more time goes on, it just feels like it's always going to be this
never gonna
hard.
end.
And it's never going to end. And,
That's true.
you know, and so in situations where we might see an always thinking trap or the potential of an always thinking trap, when we take a closer look at that thought, one of the things that we can really force ourselves to consider is the possibility how things could potentially change, right? So sort of entertain a little fantasy there about how things could change. But I think most importantly, we can find some evidence from the past, right? How have things changed in the past that you didn't anticipate that made things different? And different is important, not better, not worse, just different, right? So we sort of need to reintroduce ourselves to the idea of something you said a little while ago about there being sort of an up and down and an ebb and flow to life. Right. When we're in an always thinking trap, it doesn't feel that way. It feels like everything's down here, right? But the life really does sort of go like this. And so we need to remember incidences in which change occurred that we didn't anticipate. And then ask ourselves, how could that possibly happen again in this situation? So like some of the examples you gave were like about the pandemic, right? So, or relationships, right? So you gave the one about like interpersonal relationships. Like I think parents go through that. Like I see that with my friends that have teenagers. I'm like on the cusp of that, so I'm paying close attention to that, right? So I feel like, oh, this is just so hard, and this is always going to be so hard, and he's never going to get it together, and like all those things, you know. But when you think about like the hard times when they were a toddler or when they were an infant, and it felt never ending, and it felt like it was never going to be different, and then it was, you know, there was change, there was growth, and some of it was good, and some of it was bad, but it became different. So that relationship will become different again. You know, we can't predict if that different will be good or bad, but even just knowing that it will be different again is important.
I like that.
Yeah. So that is the toxic duo of everything and always.
So you're calling them toxic duo. Why that word? What do you mean by toxic duo?
Well, it's interesting because when we talked about them, we brought up the word hope, right? So the reason they are so toxic is when we allow those thoughts to live in our heads, it introduces hopelessness and helplessness. And hopelessness and helplessness are very dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, we know that having those thoughts can lead to depression. They could possibly lead to suicidal thoughts. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. On that topic, if you're having some of those thoughts and you're not able to reframe them, knowing that it can lead to depression and it can lead to suicidal thoughts, just know that if you're at a point where you need extra help, that Meridian is by your side, and you can get that extra help, that professional help. You can give us a call at 352-374-5600.
Absolutely. Don't mess around with the toxic duo. So thanks for tuning in for this mini series, and we will see you guys next week with a new topic. Have a great week.